Well, welcome to the Talking Landscape Photography episode 81, I believe. We're doing pretty well there, Nick, aren't we?
Hey, crikey, that's a
So,
that's a lot of time spent in front of this damn webcam, I can tell you. But we're
yeah,
enjoying it. We're certainly enjoying it.
I was listening to Six Elements of Rehab about 5 minutes ago, so I've got my headphones on for the first time. It's a good thing when these $6,000 laptops work. It's not so great when they don't. That one, I'm doing a brand new motherboard and the thing, and it's just coming back with this. The last time I had one little speaker go, Nick, and it's $6,000 laptop. It's all soldered together in one piece these days. So what might have been in the past, $50 fix, you got to replace the entire, $1,400 motherboard because it's all glued together.
Oh dear. So, is that one of those Apple things?
No comment.
Oh dear. Yeah. Well, you can try something else, Paul. But anyway.
So Loki's been sending epic spam to us this week. Somehow or other, he's right on the top of the Western Arthurs, and he's managed to get some signal and sending us like epic shots and just making us drool. Although to be fair, it's a hell of a lot of effort to get up there, and it's not for the faint-hearted. And it's one of the most full-on walks in Australia, I reckon, depending on the weather.
Yeah. Certainly on a track. Yeah.
It's one of the things that really brought Lookie here to Tasmania in the first place. He's deeply passionate about it, and he actually sent a really significant photograph, which he just posted up today, I think, which is actually from the exact spot that Peter Dromboskis took his last photograph ever. Yep. And he literally died in that area on that trip. And, we've been quietly aware of that. We don't necessarily advertise that to everyone. And I think we might have brought it up on the Dromboskis show that we did, Nick.
Yep.
And Luke's heavily influenced by Peter, and so is Nick, and so am I. And so it's a bit of a, I don't know, like a
pilgrimage,
like a not a rite of passage, but a pilgrimage of sorts, for Lukey to actually find that exact spot.
Mm.
And I know Nick's been to that exact spot as well. So
I haven't been there, mate.
So real hats off to Lukey for making the effort to get up there and for making us feel like crap for not being up there with him. Part of the reason that I haven't been there is I've just double teamed. I literally had an exhibition opening and an exhibition the last 5 weeks, and I managed to double team the same day. I picked it up in the morning and put it up at midnight the same night at a new exhibition space and opened it the next night. So I've shifted my Sky Dreaming exhibition, and I've changed it a little bit and put a whole bunch of new photos in for the next version of it, because I'm pretty keen to use that umbrella and just get it around Australia and the world at some stage or other in my lifetime. And so I had a beautiful opening at the Bylanders Collective on the Tasman Peninsula in Nubina, which is this gorgeous little coastal town. And my friend Ange is an absolute whiz at bringing people together. And on very short notice, she managed to pack the entire place out till midnight and get live musicians in and have beautiful food across the road with all sorts of cool people involved. And yeah, she was pretty amazing.
You're a lucky man.
You guys there? Looks like.
Oh, have we lost Paul? Are you there, Dylan?
Yeah, I'm here, mate. Paul's frozen on me.
He has. I'm just going to send him a message quickly, but we'd like to welcome Dylan Fox to the show. This is Dylan's show. Yeah, we obviously had our preamble. Paul was going to introduce you, mate, and I have to be really honest to the viewers, and I've known of Dylan's work for a long time, but I don't know a lot about Dylan. So, Dylan, rather than me try and bumble my way through introducing you, how about you introduce yourself to the world and where you're at, and we'll go from there. And I'll quickly talk to Paul.
Thanks, mate. I'm based over here in Perth in WA. And I've been shooting. When did I say I started? In 2000, landscape photography. I think I got into in 2007. So it's about 16 years now.
Yeah, right.
Which is starting to make me feel old. I remember the days where it was like you were the young gun. That was back in the blog days before social media. Just sort of got hooked on it in 2007, and have sort of been doing it ever since. Unfortunately, in the last couple of years with COVID, haven't well, I've produced a fair bit of work. I feel like I haven't done as much, haven't been able to travel as much. Luckily, I've had a couple of trips that have been pretty fruitful, I guess, but feel pretty inactive during, especially in WA, where we've sort of been stuck here.
Well, talk us through how that's been. I mean, obviously you run a business, and we'll talk about that. But just the sheer difficulties that Western Australia has had in particular about travelling around.
Yeah, I mean, it's just been so on and off. Like life other than travel has been incredibly normal here. So, and only in the last week or two really have we let COVID in. So it's other than travel and that uncertainty, it's been incredibly normal. We've had a couple very quick, like week or 4-day long lockdowns. But other than that, life's been sort of carried on as you'd expect. But it's just it's unfortunately me and the missus we've been pretty unlucky with travel, in the sense that in the last 2 years between us, I think we've had 4 trips have to cancel.
Oh no!
All last minute. So I think Paul might have been as well, but I was actually due to go to New Zealand. I was packed and ready to head to the airport, and then they closed the bubble burst. So had I been on the flight the night before, I would have been fine. But missed out on a 2-week camping and shooting trip over there last year. So that was it was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back sort of thing, like being itching to go somewhere and itching to shoot. And having, after going to New Zealand 2019, was just sort of desperate to get back there. And the plan was to go every year, even if it's just for a week, just to get a bunch of work done. And so that one was rough. And I missed the cutoff by a couple of hours. But we've just had a bunch of trips that have had to cancel or postpone. Luckily, last year we did get in a trip to for a friend's wedding. There was a lockdown the week before, and then it lifted like a couple of days before we all drove out through the desert to Uluru for a wedding. So managed a big trip then, but it wasn't a photography. I mean, I got some stuff done, but it was a friend's trip. So those I don't really do any research for, and it's hard to get in sort of the mood for shooting, and you're always rushed and sort of kind of can't slow down. So I just try to do what I can on trips like that and work in with people, but really don't expect to get much done. But fortunately, I was able to get a fair bit of work done, and we ended up making it from Uluru down to Adelaide, over to Melbourne and back. So we did squeeze in a trip last year, but then pretty much after we got back, then the border kind of closed again and kind of stuck here. So that was a bummer. Did finally do Shark Bay last year in September, I think. So I haven't put out any work from there, but that was probably wasn't my first aerial shoot. That was one of my first sort of dedicated trips just to go for an aerial shoot, and makes you feel pretty envious of people that just shoot aerials all the time, because you feel like you can get a year's worth of work done in an hour and a half of flying. So no, I got a bit of stuff done recently, but like I said, I've two trips with some small ones in between. I haven't felt very active over the last 2 years. And for anyone, whether it be photography or whatever it is you enjoy doing, if you're not doing it, you feel can sort of get you down in the dumps a bit, especially then in the world of Instagram, where you see other people. It feels like everyone else is constantly shooting and constantly making great work.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think that everyone's necessarily like traveling and posting immediate stuff either. They might be going through their archives, but it still looks like everyone's having an amazing time seeing the world and that sort of thing, when it might not be quite the case. But,
that's it. And that's hard to remember, or to kind of be conscious of if you are scrolling, particularly Instagram. And it does. It just feels like everyone else is constantly doing stuff. And you talk to people and they're like, oh, no, I've just done 2 sort of week-long trips this year. and was just very productive sort of thing.
Yeah.
Not everyone is constantly shooting.
No, certainly not in this world. And look, it's probably worth acknowledging we had a pre-recorded show with Dylan Toe on last week, so we didn't go live. And in the 2 weeks that we've been, sort of between the live shows, the world's changed a whole bunch. And we've had the terrible situation in the Ukraine, and I think that's going to probably cause a lot of trouble for travel, particularly in terms of cost, with fuel and stuff like that. I mean, we're starting to see fuel go through the roof. How much are you paying a litre for 91 unleaded over there at the moment?
My ute runs diesel, but it's
it'd be a couple of cents cheaper for diesel, I suppose.
Yeah. No, diesel's cheaper over here, but it's so what I think it's just over $2 at the moment.
Yeah.
For 91. On average. It varies a fair bit, but it's crazy. This time when COVID kicked off, we had at one point we were paying just under $1 a litre for fuel. So I mean that was brief, but it was still probably averaging like $1.40 if I had to guess. So it's gone through the roof, and it is a nightmare for travel. And I can't imagine now what people are paying up north, because last time I was up in the Kimberley, I think we paid, I mean, this is out on stations, but I think we got as high as 3 something.
Yeah, wow.
Not mistaken. But so I mean now they're probably paying 4 something.
Yeah.
I'm back, boys, if you guys can hear me.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we've got you, mate.
There you go. I've had to go old school. I get on my phone. I think one of my neighbours must have trashed the internet streaming something naughty.
Yes.
But,
mate, that's why we tried to cut you guys off from the internet the other day, but looks like you've recovered.
You had a pretty good go, mate. You managed to get almost the entire state of Tasmania offline. That was pretty impressive.
Yeah. That was,
and that's phone as well as internet. I couldn't make any calls. I couldn't check anything, and it was quite an interesting experience. You couldn't get money out. You couldn't buy food.
Of course.
Yeah. So for those that don't know at home, all of the state of Tasmania's internet went out for about 6 or 7 hours, I suppose, maybe a bit longer. And it gave us a real taste of a post-apocalyptic world where there's no internet, and you couldn't go to the bank and get cash to pay for things because the bank systems were down, the ATMs were down, so there was no FPOS or cash. I didn't even think of that when you guys mentioned it. No one could call anyone. No one could talk to anyone. It was my Telstra phone came back on fairly quickly in terms of making phone calls, but I couldn't get hold of my kids, and they're on a subsidiary of Optus network, and so I wasn't able to get hold of them to sort of say everything's all right, but you might just have to sort of fend for yourselves for a bit. It was a bit interesting, but it goes to show just how vulnerable we are to, worldwide, to the internet going out.
Yeah, it's great. Did this keep recording when you switched over to your phone, Paul?
Yeah, I just checked on YouTube before, and it seems to be running fine. Nick, you're recording on your computer?
Yeah, I couldn't work out how to do it. So when you said it was live, I was happy with that. So yeah.
Yeah, just in case. I just thought.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
But somebody records it as a backup. You could do it too, Dylan, if you wanted to.
Yeah, I can't remember.
It's
I think it's
normally.
I was just going to say before I asked that, I was just going to say when everything does go offline, I suppose it is, other than not being able to access your money and whatever, it's probably a little reminiscent of. That's what I enjoy so much about getting away and going camping, is that you're not even thinking about your phone. Like most of the time here, a lot of the time you might not be in reception anyway, but you just phone stays in the car, or it's always a nice way to shut off. I'm trying to get a bit back to that this year. Like I was saying, I haven't felt overly productive over the last couple of years. But I used to go camping. My effort was like I'd go camping at least once a month, even if it was just an overnighter. And overnight you might not always come away with necessarily any great shots, but it was just that sort of refresh button and get off social media and all that. And haven't done much of that. The plan was to do it a lot more this year, and then were talking just before. Paul mentioned my ute setup for camping, but that I just sold that yesterday.
Ricardo be upset. He said you've got the best rig in the business. He said,
mate, wait till he sees the next one. Wait till he sees.
Upgrading, are you?
Yeah, wait till he sees what I've got cooking. So,
that's good.
So I won't be going anywhere till that's done, unfortunately.
Yeah, nice. And just also, we're talking about Ukraine briefly, but we do need to mention the terrible situation in southeast Queensland and in New South Wales, and a lot of the eastern seaboard now of New South Wales. They've got some once in a lifetime flooding, and it's killed a number of people. It's sent thousands and thousands of homes underwater, and wiped out a lot of businesses as well. It's going to have a massive effect on people for a long time. So I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge the terrible time that our friends are having in New South Wales and Queensland at the moment. We are thinking of you, and I'm sorry if we come across as sort of laughing and being jovial in your time of need. But hopefully, those that have got the internet and are sitting dry and home are able to get a bit of enjoyment from tonight's presentation. So I just wanted to make sure that we had a shout out to you guys, and hope everything is going to be all right, and people band together and help out as best they can. But thinking of you guys up there at the moment.
Yeah, some of the images I've seen coming out of there are crazy. I saw one yesterday of some street. There was a before and after photo showing them a Macca's, and the golden arches were just about underwater, and those things are meters high.
Yeah. There's a crazy photo that's a verified photo. You wouldn't even think it's real, of a quad bike hanging off a power line in Gympie.
I saw that.
And that's
by its handlebar. I saw that.
Yeah, by its handlebars off a power line, and it's obviously been floating down the flood waters and got caught in the power line as the waters of.
That looks about like 40 or 50 feet high, Nick.
It's crazy. You wouldn't think it's real.
It's mental. And people saying, "Oh, fake Photoshop," but no, it was taken by one of the employees of the Energex company, I think they have up there in Queensland, and posted on their Facebook page. So it's a genuine picture, and it's just crazy. I've never seen anything like it, and just the sheer devastation of what's happened up there. And at this stage, I think at least 13 or 14 people have died in these floods, 9, I think, or 10 in Queensland, and at least 4 in New South Wales, in Lismore. So it's a terrible tragedy, and just the sheer volume of water that's come through there and destroyed towns. And unfortunately, a lot of these places have less insurance than they would possibly want, because the cost of insuring for flood is prohibitive, or insurers just simply refuse to insure certain properties in certain areas. And of course, people say, "Oh, well, maybe you shouldn't live in a flood area," but it's not that simple, especially if you've been paid out before by an insurance company, and then you've had to rebuild in the same place or fix up your house in the same place, and then your insurers then said, "Well, we're not going to insure you again," and other companies won't insure you. So it's not as simple as just saying, go live somewhere else. That's not an option for most of these people. So a terrible amount of sympathy from us to everyone affected. And
really thoughtful. Thank you.
Let's hope they get back up on their feet as soon as possible. And there's a number of fundraisers going on GoFundMe and stuff. So if you have got a few dollars to spare, then please look those up on Facebook or GoFundMe itself, and contribute a few dollars to the cleanup. That'd be great. But anyway, we'll continue on with the show and talking to Dylan Fox about his wonderful work. Dylan, you run a photography company, is that right?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not landscape orientated, but over here I have a business where how would you describe it? I refer to it as like a real estate, or basically a marketing media business sort of thing. So we've got a big team, and we do all the sort of primarily for sort of the top end of town, which is nice. So we do, we're pretty sought after around some of the real flash places. Like last week, one of the places I shot was a $10 million plus home new build. So, yes, we do stuff for a lot of real estate agents and then a lot of home builders and stuff like that. So there's me, and I think we've got a team of 5. We've put a couple new guys on, so 5 or 6 other photographers.
Yeah, wow.
We've got videographer, copywriter, floor planners. We do 3D virtual tours, aerial photography, just the whole lot.
Yeah, terrific. What do you use for your 3D virtual tours? What sort of setup?
They're done on Matterports.
You use Matterport, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually, to be honest, not too clued in on them. I've never done one, but they're still sort of they've been particularly useful during COVID when there's a lot of sort of people that during lockdowns there was a huge push for them because people obviously couldn't get into houses and whatever. They're one of those things. Some agents love them, some hate them. So sort of hit and miss. Whereas photography is obviously essential. Video is a great marketing tool for real estate agents who sort of want to put their own flavor on their brand. So we can do a lot of different things. So yeah, that's sort of the day-to-day grind. It is a lot of fun. Like I said, we get to see some unbelievable houses. See how the other part of town's living, but it's a much different pace. I do really enjoy it. I've been doing it a long time, about 10 years, I think. Right. But it's a much different pace. But it does sort of much different pace to sort of landscape stuff in a sense. But it I think like any photography, it probably then what you subconsciously learn doing work like that sort of trickles into landscape work as well. Like with the real estate stuff, if I'm doing twilight shoots, like landscape photography, I've got kind of a bit longer, but like I've got really 30 minutes of like good light to get most of the house done in. So I'm like on a big, this place last week was the 6x7. So like I'm sweating, I'm like racing around and which I really enjoy. And that's kind of it's what's the word? It's sort of meditative in the sense that you're not thinking about, I'm not even thinking about shooting so much. Like you're not second guessing, like, do I need to move a little here or move a little there? You're just doing, and which is always kind of where I like to be when I'm shooting. Like you're really just not thinking so much about what you're doing. And I think a lot of people, I've during COVID, I've played guitar all my life, but during COVID, I got right back into it and have now spent a small fortune on guitars and sort of been addicted to that again. But I noticed that sort of similarity in listening to other guitarists online and buying courses and just talking with the guys at my local guitar store. Like you obviously develop your skill, and then obviously working with the camera becomes second nature, and you're not having to think about that. And you've looked at so much good photography and you've tried so many different things that the technical aspect I find you're no longer really thinking about. And when I've described it to people when I'm teaching in the past, I don't really do any of that anymore, but it was like when I'm looking through the viewfinder now, it's just like that looks good.
Yep.
And I liken that to the guitar, where it's like someone that can improvise and solo just off the top of their head. They obviously know what notes to play and when and what's available to them, but it's just that sounds good. And I've seen similarities with that with photography, and that like buying the most expensive guitar won't make the beginner guitar player a great guitarist. And you see that with photography and people buying crazy cameras 2 years in, sort of thing.
It's an interesting point actually, because I feel very much the same about my own photography. There's not a lot of, there's a lot of thought that goes into compositions, but it's not a hard think. It's like a soft think. I don't know if that's a good way of describing it, but it's
sort of subconscious.
Yeah, but it comes with a lot of experience, and I think that's the main thing to remember. So those that are starting out or not too far into it and still having to think hard about the settings and technical aspects, over time it will get a lot easier, and things become much more natural. But I also think it's a point for, if you're looking for a photography teacher, you've got to be able to find a photography teacher that understands that what they do and know is coming very naturally to them, and that they've got to be able to then put into words and go back to basics to make the beginner understand it. And I'm not sure that all photographers that offer education at that point, if you know what I mean. Like
you got to be able to articulate it still.
Yeah, you do, and you've got to be able to, think back to that time when you were beginning and what things were stressing you out when you're trying to take a picture. And I think it's an interesting point, actually, and it's a good point of discussion.
So let's go ahead. Sorry,
I was going to ask Paul what he thought about that aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting a bit segued into education, but I mean, I think it's easy when you've been doing something a long time to start losing the relatability of the beginning and the things that become intuitive, because you've done the hard work to get beyond the technical aspects of the craft that you should get caught up with at the beginning, which is all about cameras and angles and lenses and all this sort of technical bits and bobs. And really, when you get to that point where you're comfortable with everything, it's very intuitive and sometimes spontaneous and just pure creativity. And I think you forget the amount of time you put into moving past that yourself once you've done it. And it's kind of hard to go back. And you've got to be a very patient person. I was just reflecting, Dylan, when you talked about the crossover from your real estate work, I was thinking, geez, you must have to be great at planning and very, very aware of environmental conditions, and also the level of patience and craftsmanship and attention to detail that you must have to exhibit, doing that high-end real estate work. It must come through in your landscape work as well, I would assume.
Yeah, it's all sort of just like I said, it sort of translates over in the sense that it's still photography, so you're still sort of practicing in a sense. The real estate stuff is like I said, especially on Twilight stuff, it's very run and gun, which I really enjoy. But to be honest, I sort of rock up to a shoot, and we've got a lot of really long-term clients that I've worked with for years, and they sort of know what we expect when we get to a shoot. Like, it's got to be ready to go. We're the photographer, not the cleaner, sort of thing. So I can get to a shoot and basically walk through the house once just to get my bearings, know how many rooms there are, what's where. And as you're doing that, it's the same. I'm not really thinking. I'm just going like, okay, I'm going to start here. There is a general sort of workflow when I'm teaching, like, our new crew when people come on board, but you can still sort of start to pick in the house, like, all right, I'll be starting here, and then this will be my general sort of workflow. And you don't even always get that right. You kind of go like, all right, this room, because you're working with the light inside and out, then you start to go like, okay, this room's ready, and then you get to the next one, it's like, okay, that's not, I'll come back to that. And it's all very fast, which I like, but I kind of still have to warn homeowners when I get there, especially on something big that I really moving through. It's like, don't stress. I haven't stuffed this up, but I give them the heads up, like, in 10 minutes I'm going to be racing around, and it's going to look crazy, but it allows me to sort of, I've seen the way other people do it, but it sort of allows me to just get, 6x7s maybe a bit different, but it allows me to get everything done when that room should be shot, rather than working slowly and going, okay, because it's a massive house, part of this, the front end's going to be shot a little early, then the bulk's going to be shot at the right time, and then there's going to be some stuff that I've shot a bit too late. It's like, I prefer to work quick and sort of be able to get it all done at the right time. And it's in a sense, I describe it to people as, your compositions, what works well. And like I said, I've been doing it for about a decade. So, there's sort of not a kitchen I haven't seen before, sort of thing. So what kind of kitchen compositions work well. And at that point, again, like the landscape stuff, you're not thinking, like we were saying before, you're not thinking too hard about exactly where to place things. I find everything becomes feel, like with landscape stuff. It's just move the camera slightly. I'm just sort of moving around until it feels right, and that's where I press the button. And it's the same with landscape stuff. Like I'm just framing stuff up, and I'm not going, okay, this is on the thirds and whatever, and there's a nice leading line that's landing perfectly here. It's just this feels.
This feels right. Yeah.
It just feels balanced. Yeah. And like Paul said, it can be hard to then try to teach someone, go back to your roots and, okay, why does that work? That, like you said, in and of itself is a skill, how to then teach that. But I don't know, that's sort of how I describe it to everyone, that like largely with landscape stuff is that it just feels right. And it does, you got to do, like they say, your 10,000 hours, but yeah, it ends up just being feel, and that's when you start to get, I guess, to the art of anything.
Well, I guess
why
we've got
don't
to.
we take that thread back? I mean, on a photographer's portrait, it's not about doing the obvious in terms of, my dad gave me a camera when I was 6 type thing, but it is quite significant to get a bit of a sense of people's journeys and their influences along the way, and we'll pick up in conversationally kind of where it goes on. Like I just spoke to Ricardo, and he was like, "Geez, Dylan's one of the guys, one of the younger guys on the scene, but he's been doing it for a long time." And he was saying, like, he remembered when you were like 17 or 18 and just hitting it pretty hard and getting right in there really early. And I've certainly noticed a huge evolution in your post-production style in the last 4 or 5 years as well, which I'll get into later in the show and see what influences you've got to go there. But if you're open to sort of heading back a little bit and maybe, because some people's influences are life experience, they're different art mediums, different thought processes, and it can be really fascinating for people to get a bit of an insight into who you are and then see how those qualities come through in your work.
I mean, it's interesting you say that you've seen a difference in the post-processing in the last 4 or 5 years. I might have been talking to Rick about it. I can't remember who I was talking to in the last number of years about that same thing, or maybe it was a mate in the US, and saying the same thing. It's like only in the last 4 or 5 years do I feel like I've finally sort of am happy with what I'm producing, in the sense that images that are 4 or 5 years old, I still go, yeah, I still like that. Whereas prior to that, kind of look back at, I think everyone probably has that same sort of thing. You go, Jesus Christ, like, I've always liked working with color, but look at some stuff from 7 or 8 years ago, it's like, Jesus Christ, like, tone it back a bit. But that's all part of the process, and the learning curve now for people is so much quicker. Like,
not wrong.
anyone that's was going to be good, that starts photography and sort of has the eye for it now, like 2 years in, you're like, Jesus Christ, you're most of the way there, sort of thing. But that's with everything. The learning curve with everything these days is very fast, with being able to just buy online tutorials and stuff and learn from the best of the best in whatever it is you're doing. But
I remember you saying before the show you might have a few classics up your sleeve. We've sort of been rambling on for about half an hour. It might be nice to have that conversation overlaid by some visuals, and I don't know if you got any examples of things like that we can bounce off, or that maybe you can speak to in terms of where you were and where you've come to. I don't know.
Well, I don't think I put any absolute. I put some of my classics in there, but I don't think I put any apps. I definitely wouldn't have dropped any in this folder that I despise.
Either. Just checking.
But I guess
it'd be nice to get our ugly mugs off the screen and look at something a bit more beautiful.
All right, let me see if I can figure this out again. Let's see. Is that working?
Yeah, perfect.
Beautiful.
Let me see if I can move. Do you see like your screens?
So I can see 8 images up at the moment.
It's just that, so I can probably move that over there. All right, yeah. So I guess while those are sitting there, a bit about, I guess, where I started. So yeah, like I said, I started landscape photography. I started in 2007. I've always been, prior to that, I was always interested in photography. But that was back when I was in high school, and how it's changed now. But back then it wasn't popular enough to run photography for my year group.
Yeah.
So I kept having to wait, and it wasn't until I was year 11 that I could do photography. I mean, now everyone wants to be a photographer sort of thing, but and then year 12 with my teacher, Mark Temoff, who I'm still chat with every now and then, was a brilliant teacher, made it a lot of fun. And we did like a class camp over on Rottnest Island. And part of that was we had to do some portrait stuff, all for your like end of year portfolio, and then some landscape stuff. And so the name back then, and still, but the name that was thrown around in class back then was Christian Fletcher, which is no surprise. So I'd never done anything landscape orientated before that. And I remember just seeing his stuff, and, you know, credit to him, it's not the sort of stuff he's doing. Like, he's doing his stuff now has just continued to progress. But back then he had some, I don't think he would take offense to it, but there was some stuff that we were getting shown that was a little more touristy. And it was of places I knew, and that instantly sort of, as a kid, it was just like, oh, look how amazing! Like, I know exactly where that is, where that was taken. Like, I've been there before, and look how incredible it looks. And yeah, so I just got hooked on Christian's website. Like I said, we were shown is probably more sort of, how would you say it? Sorry, Christian, it sounds harsh. It's more commercial stuff, because we weren't getting shown we were getting shown his stuff of places we were going to go, put it that way.
Well, Christian's pretty open about that. Like, I'm friends with Christian. I've been to his gallery a few times, and he's still quite conscious that what sells in the gallery is that kind of work, and it's not necessarily where his artistic passion really lies. So he has to sort of bridge the gap between what's commercially viable and what he's personally drawn to do. And he's got to get enough runs on the board with his traditional work in order to give him the freedom to sort of justify, from a commercial point of view anyway, just pursuing his art. So, but he's
you've said that a lot nicer than me, a lot better than me.
Yeah, he's a real artist at heart, Christian, very deeply so, and multiple mediums too. You know, I've actually seen some of his paintings, which are amazing.
Yeah, he can draw. I've seen some of those.
But hats off to him that, you know, like yourself, has had a very long-running successful business, and gallery-wise, there's almost no one in Australia that mirrors the success of what he's had and the consistency.
His gallery is incredible.
Real testament to understanding the market and knowing how to navigate it, and you know, the challenges of existing in that realm when you're really genuinely, authentically an artistic person at heart is been quite a dance for Christian, I reckon, over the years.
It's his gallery's second to none. I was lucky enough, so 2007 we were doing that stuff. We had to do a sunrise shoot, and I mean, like, immediately that sunrise shoot, I was hooked. And I remember riding, it's, you know, only bikes on the island for anyone who hasn't, but there's no cars. And I was just riding around by myself on like a year 12 camp trip sort of thing, where I've got a bunch of friends there, but I was just riding off by myself to go find stuff to shoot for sunset already. So I was quite literally just hooked straight away, not taking anything great, but it all just started there and just snowballed. And then I think I met Christian then in 2008, my first year out of high school, down at his gallery, and it all just snowballed from there. And I think the color that then came through in my work, that admittedly went overboard a number of years for those first handful of years, was, you know, I grew up in a household. My mum's a painter and always been an artist and sculptor and stuff. And we had some crazy wall colors in our house when I was growing up as a kid. So I've always been around bright, vibrant color. I mean, it's not my proudest work, but I can see I've got a Antelope Canyon piece sitting behind, just an old print sitting behind me. And that stuff I love. Like, anyone that's been there knows how crazy the light is in that place. And that's probably what always drew me to color, was that seeing places like slot canyons and seeing color like that. It is sort of very out of everyday life sort of thing. Like it's not often you find yourself in a really rich red slot canyon. So I guess in that sense, I could see why it's interesting, especially when you're young. But luckily, that style, I've since refined it.
I think it's with like anything in life, Dylan. If you push the envelope of things and then you come back and settle where you're comfortable, like it's whether in any skill or any craft or even in relationships and at work, it's just how you find your place. You've got to roam around in the scope before you figure out where you actually want to spend your time.
No, I completely agree. So it's just funny you mentioned that in the last 4 or 5 years, because I don't really know what happened, but it was same thing. Like I think I was saying to someone a couple of years ago, it's kind of just in the last couple of years, I feel like I've just sort of found my groove a bit.
I found it really noticeable, Dylan, to be honest. And there's a certain level of finesse and craftsmanship and that's coming through any work, and in terms of the handling of all the tonal range in particular is, and the finishing aspect of the work has just really just gone up on a level. In fact, a level that I don't know how to reproduce myself. So it's very noticeable. And
I appreciate it, mate.
My sensibility, if I got a sense of where I was curious those influences have come from, it sort of felt like there's a bit of Pacific Northwest sort of influence there in terms of the stylization aspects and the finishing aspects of your work. I don't know if that 100%. Has. I was going to ask you that.
Yeah. So then probably I wouldn't know what year it was. It would be at least 10 years ago, maybe more. Was the first time I saw it. So again, pre-social media. I don't know where I saw it, but somehow I came across Mark Adams's work, and I remember the actual photo of his I saw. I still don't remember where I saw it, but I remember which image it is, and his style was just like unlike anything I'd ever seen, and I was just completely blown away. It was a sort of sunset storm image over like I don't know if it was Death Valley or just like salt flat. It wasn't salt, but like a flat mud plain sort of thing, and but just the colors, like I've never seen someone work with color that way, and I don't know, it just stood out beyond anything I'd ever seen before. He's obviously since been, he's influenced a lot of people, but I guess you hear that with teaching, with like I've always told people, is like when you're starting out, like I like to tell people, it's like just look at a lot of photography, and you don't have to necessarily, there'll be people that are really popular, and now it's easy to see how popular someone is on Instagram, but there'll be people that are popular for a reason. And, you can look at their work, but I'd also always recommend to people you find people whose work that you just really like. Because how many photographers do you know that have 1,000 Facebook, Instagram followers, but their work is like phenomenal?
Yep.
So you go, find those people, and it doesn't have to be the popular work. Just find the stuff that you love and just look at it and just start to learn, like really sort of assess it. Like, why does this work? Why doesn't it work? What is it you like about it? What don't? And do that amongst a bunch of photographers. And over time, like I said, it's taken me a long time, but it eventually your style will come from that. Again, not to keep going back to guitar, but it's the same thing with music. Like all musicians have their, influences. Like on guitar, everyone probably to some extent is influenced by Jimi Hendrix, but then have their own spin and their own experiences are sort of put on that. So it's the same sort of thing, but he was definitely the first guy. Mark was definitely the first guy that whose work of that sort of like real wide angle style that I just went, holy shit, like this is unbelievable. And then since then, there's a lot of guys over in the States that are just unreal, like Eric Bennett and David Thompson, Ryan Dyer, the list is going on. Ali, I was looking for his name there, is on the tip of my tongue. His work is unreal. Yeah,
it's some beautiful, beautiful work. How about you pull up some more of your images, mate, and start talking us through them?
I'll jump the queue a bit. This one, again, very, very vibrant, but this one's over in New Zealand, and I only show you this one first because it wasn't the first one, but it was one of the images that Mark Adams gave me like big props on, and said how sort of perfect the composition was. And it wasn't an image that I was particularly, that's always the way. It wasn't an image that I really thought much of. But then when you hear it for someone like that, you go, holy shit, like they think it's good. So that's the only reason I sort of included that one in there. That one's over in New Zealand.
Oh, it's a beautiful shot, mate.
In Milford Sound.
There's a really exquisite sense of design in this image that comes through for me. It looks really masterfully composed, and the diagonal components that just overlay of each other just sit so perfectly with each other.
And that's kind of what Mark said. I think he said that you might have taken the words out of his mouth. And that was, like I said, I just posted it and it was just like, oh yeah, it's a nice fern forest photo. But
well, that's where, you know, like you said, like it just feels good. You know, like you wouldn't necessarily have gone through a thought process. And my process is very intuitive. I'm very non-clinical on how I do things as well. That's why I like to get the technical stuff out of the way, so I can just be in the moment and just pop the button when I feel like it. But Ricardo said when's the next New Zealand trip, because he absolutely adores. This is Ricardo de Cunha, actually a good friend of all of ours. I was speaking to him this afternoon about Dylan coming on, and he said he particularly loved the last body of work he brought out of New Zealand, and he was quite conscious that you literally had your bags packed and were ready to go when Australia changed their rules, and you had to literally unpack your bags again. Tell us about that.
So I think we just touched on it while your internet cut out, but mate, I was New Zealand had obviously been on the to-do list for years, and then 2019 got over there, and I think everyone does, but I was there for 2 weeks with the missus, and we had a camper van and we're just cruising around, and just fell in love with the place. Like it's so unbelievable. You know, I've spent a lot of time in the US, and I'm half American, so I've got a lot of family there. And
me too.
New Zealand's just like there's everything there, and it's all just crammed in. Like we're only on the South Island, but it's all just crammed in. You just drive for a couple of hours, and you just see so much, and it's also everything's just big. Like even their coastline, like my mate Will over there, like his coastal stuff that he just released a couple of weeks ago. It's like, you know, we've got great coastline here in the southwest of WA, but I look at the stuff there, and I'm just like, everything's big. Like all the cliffs are huge, and there's mountains in the background, and so yeah, I just fell in love. And the plan, so I think Paul, while you were offline, I was just saying, like, the plan then was like, all right, I'm going, you know, it's not as close to Perth as it is for you guys, but it's what, 8-hour flight. So I was like, I'm going back every year, even if it's just for a week, just to, you know, maybe you go spend a week in pretty much one spot and just shoot, and, you know, again, just sort of tap out from the real world for a bit. But COVID put a pin in that, and then I was booked last year to go, had the bags packed, and then they closed. They closed the New Zealand closed from there, and they closed the bubble. And it was like anyone that basically, if you got in from midnight that night, anytime after midnight, you would have to quarantine. And I think my plane was due to land at like 1:30 in the morning or 2. So I missed it by a couple of hours. And so like we touched on earlier, that's sort of the side of landscape photography that I do struggle with. That, like, if I don't do it for a while, you know, just life gets in the way. And then especially Instagram, like where you're constantly seeing amazing stuff, and it feels like everyone else is constantly shooting and just constantly making great work, even though they may only be getting in 2 trips a year, but they've just got a backlog.
That's the game.
Yeah, it can kind of really mess with you, and well, me at least. And then you get this itch. It's like, all right, I got to go away now. I got to go now and do something, and which is a good motivator, I guess, in a sense. But if you let it be, and so then when that flight got cancelled, I was wrecked. I was just wrecked.
Show us some Kiwi work if you got it floating around while you're talking about New Zealand, if you can.
I don't know what I've got in this folder. I can always jump on my website. That one, I put this one in here because just because it was more the technical work that went into it.
Walk us through it.
So this was shot at, I want to say 12 mil, handheld, and then so it's a handheld focus stack, and there's probably a blend in there for the sky as well, an exposure blend.
Will Patino style, mate.
Yeah, so Will's my mate I'm talking about over there. He's like his new coastal.
We had one on the show just 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, and it was insane, and we're all just sitting there gobsmacked. What a collection that is.
Oh, mate. So me and Will talk pretty much every day, and I'm just forever jealous of what he gets to shoot over there. And but no, that's why I wanted to get back all the time. And so me and Will had planned to meet up, and then the flight's cancelled, and I was sitting there like the next day and messaging Will and just thinking like, mate, I'm supposed to be like there, right? Like it was driving me nuts. That whole weekend was a nightmare. I was just sort of a zombie, but that's life. That's the way it is at the moment. But hopefully get there this year. We'll see. This one, nothing crazy exciting about it, but it was more what a nightmare it was to put together, because just being at 12 mil and this little sheet of ice in the foreground was centimeters away from the lens, and it's all constantly sort of, because it's just sitting on the surface, even though it's calm, it's all constantly moving. So handheld stacking, like trying to do that as fast as I can, and then shutter speeds are probably down at like, I don't know, a 30th of a second or something. So trying to keep real still and then adjust the focus, and then actually trying to having to piece it all together later in Photoshop was a bit of a nightmare, but it worked. But it is that's the side of it that I actually sort of hate. I hate doing all the, unfortunately, I think of it as like housekeeping stuff. Is you don't have to, if you can avoid bloody focus stacking and blending. I love to.
I think that's Luke Sharkey.
We'll just interrupt for a minute. Just unshare your screen for a minute, Dylan. Dylan, just unshare your screen because Luke's up on the Western Arthurs live streaming. Hang on.
I'll see if I can.
Just unshare, and Luke, you.
I'm trying to, but I don't know where it's giving me the option to. Oh, it's got a different screen.
Yeah, go ahead, Luke, you upstart.
How you going, guys? I hope the noise isn't too bad. I just thought I'd jump in and apologise to Dylan for not being there tonight. But
oh my gosh,
to do tonight. So hope you don't mind.
Looks terrible.
Quite nice up here. Anyway, I just wanted to say good day. I've got about 10% battery that's going to last me a few days. So, good to see you, Dylan. And
likewise,
so much
mate.
for joining us. And hopefully catch up when I'm over in WA, whenever that next is.
Yeah, well, I think everyone's free to. I think they open the floodgates in a few days, maybe today.
Good. Absolute champion, Lukey. Oh my god.
Well, hopefully I can get out. My shoes are totally ruined at the moment, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to walk out properly, but we'll see how we go.
We'll send the helicopter for you, mate.
No, so I'll give you guys a bit of a quick look anyway.
Yeah.
How do I?
Oh, please.
There we go. There we go.
Oh man.
Oh my god.
Sunset. Last light of sunset just down here as well.
Oh, geez.
Spoon links down there.
Yeah. Oh, it's crazy.
Luckily, we didn't have the blackout, so the internet outage or whatever it was, so I could actually jump on because the reception's been terrible otherwise. So see you guys. Don't want to hijack the show. See you, and thanks again for joining, Dylan.
On your mate,
next week.
Oh, Luke,